Hello, youth. Today we are in Genesis chapter 12. Genesis chapter 13. Chapter 12 was last time, wasn't it? Genesis chapter 12, and it forms a nice little contained narrative, including a story that you're probably familiar with already. But I'm going to read it. First, I'll pray. Father, please speak to us today by your Spirit through your word. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. So Genesis chapter 13. And Abram went up out of Egypt, he and his wife and all that he had, and Lot with him, into the south. And Abram was very rich in cattle, in silver, and in gold. And he went on his journeys from the south even to Bethel, unto the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Hai, unto the place of the altar which he had made there at the first. And there Abram called on the name of the Lord. And Lot also, which went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents, and the land was not able to bear them, that they might dwell together, for their substance was great, so that they could not dwell together. And there was a strife between the herdsmen of Abram's cattle and the herdsmen of Lot's cattle. And the Canaanite and the Perizzite dwelled then in the land. And Abram said unto Lot, Let there be no strife, I pray thee, between me and thee, and between my herdmen and thy herdsmen, for we be brethren. Is not the whole land before thee? Separate thyself, I pray thee, from me. If thou wilt take the left hand, then I will go to the right. Or if thou depart to the right hand, then I will go to the left. And Lot lifted up his eyes, and beheld all the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, even as the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as thou comest unto Zoar. Then Lot chose him all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated themselves the one from the other. Abram dwelled in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelled in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent toward Sodom. But the men of Sodom were wicked and sinners before the Lord exceedingly. And the Lord said unto Abram, after that Lot was separated from him, Lift up now thine eyes, and look from the place where thou art, northward, and southward, and eastward, and westward. For all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it, and to thy seed forever. And I will make thy seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered. Arise, walk through the land in the length of it, and in the breadth of it, for I will give it unto thee. Then Abram removed his tent, and came and dwelt in the plain of Mamre, which is in Hebron, and built there an altar unto the Lord. Okay, so this chapter contains, I think, a fairly familiar story in the Bible. Maybe you've heard of it. When Abram and Lot separate. Okay. Before I get there, though, let's go back to the beginning and just see what pops out at us as we go along. Now, it says he came up out of Egypt. You remember he was down there because there had been a famine in the land, and it seemed, at least to me, that Abram's faith wavered in God's provision for him, and he told Sarai, as you recall last time, to say that she was his sister because he feared for his life. And God turned it all around, of course, and Abram left Egypt with all the presents that Pharaoh had given him, and now was coming back into the land. So presumably, either the famine had let up, or maybe Abram by now had become so wealthy that he didn't fear for his life in terms of starving to death. I don't know. Generally, even if you had a whole lot of animals, right, and you were secure in that way, if there was a famine, then there was usually a famine because there was not much rain and not much grass, and therefore not much animals and not much food for you. So I'm just guessing that maybe the famine had let up because Abram would have still had to have some places to graze his animals. But I don't know. Maybe that's part of the reason the land was not able to bear he and Lot. It does say Abram was very rich in cattle, in silver, and in gold. So just file that away, and we're going to come back to that, I think, when we get to the main passage here. It also says he came back from the south, and he got back to the place that it mentioned back in chapter 12, called Bethel. All right. Now, Abram didn't call it Bethel, which means house of God. Abram's grandson named it Bethel. So why is it called Bethel here? Because, right, these are the writings of Moses. At least he compiled them and published them, I guess you could say, centuries after Abram lived. So that place Bethel shows up many times, actually. Abram first pauses here when he first comes in Canaan from the north and comes down, and it says he lodged in a place between Bethel and Hai. Okay, and we'll talk about that other place in a minute. In other places in the Bible, it points out that there's a hill or a mountain or a high place between the community that would later be known as Bethel and this community known as Hai or Ai. And that seems to be the place where Abram stopped. Okay, but later on, there was a town really close by, or even a city, and so that high place was kind of called Bethel, along with the city next to it. That just reminds me, here in Springdale we have Bethel Heights, right up to the north of Springdale. So anyway, Abram's grandson is the one who actually names it Bethel. But it figures as a prominent place throughout the history of Israel. Okay, Abram's grandson Jacob names it Bethel after he goes to sleep and has his vision of the angels coming up and down on a ladder. And it was one of the places where Samuel would judge Israel on his circuit that he would ride. So, and there's many other references to Bethel. So apparently this was a special place. Jacob called it the gateway to heaven. And Abram met God there, or at least called upon the name of the Lord there, and on his initial journey south. Okay, so now he goes back to this place after he's had this adventure down in Egypt, and he's coming back up. And it says, Abram called on the name of the Lord. Now, what does that mean? It said way back in Genesis before the flood, there was a verse that said men began to call on the name of the Lord. I think there may have been a passage where Noah called on the name of the Lord. There's maybe you've sang that song, I will call upon the Lord. So what does it mean to call upon the name of the Lord? Well, I'm not sure we'll completely explore all of that, but I will just point out that I don't think we have yet, that when the Bible, when this translation at least, and most translations do this, when they put the word Lord in all capital letters, so sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not, okay? And there's a difference. So when the translators translate and write down the word Lord, and if it's in all capital letters, then that means something special. It means God's name. Okay, so if you want to say Yahweh, or perhaps you're more familiar with Jehovah, okay, that's that word. Okay, and so the translators treated God's name with great reverence, as it seems the original Hebrew writers had, and they kind of wanted to not keep using God's name over and over and over in passing. So instead, they wrote this word Lord. But it's helpful when you're reading it, if you see that in all caps, you remember that's God's name. Okay? So then it makes this passage a little more sensical. It says there Abram called on the name of Jehovah, right? In other words, he called on the name of the true God by name. and this is not the first time we've seen that word in all caps. If you go back, it's interesting to see. Sometimes it'll call God God or the Most High, but often it calls him Lord, or it'll say the Lord God, right? That means Jehovah God. Okay, so it makes a little more sense if you can just remember that the all caps is God's name. What does it mean, though, to call on the name of Jehovah? Well, just a couple of thoughts, okay? If we look around in the Bible, and we're not going to right now, you can see examples of people calling on the name of the Lord with thanks, okay? They're saying, I'm thankful, but I'm not just happy that things are going well generally. I'm specifically thankful to the one true God, from whom all blessings flow, right? I'm calling on him and thanking him for the blessings. I'm giving credit where credit is due, all right? There's also many times when people call on the name of the Lord in the Bible for help and deliverance. So they're not just, again, screaming, is there a doctor in the house? Someone save me, help, help, call 911. No, they're saying, God Almighty in heaven, the one true God, the maker of heaven and earth, you have the power to save me from this situation. Please do it. Okay? You're acknowledging who he is and what he could do for you. All right? So that's just a couple of points, right? You could go on and think of ways. It's sort of like prayer, right? But when you pray, to whom do you pray? Right? Are you just praying generally for good luck and good fortune, or is it like crossing your fingers? No, you're talking to someone who can hear your prayers and who can answer your prayers. All right. So I'm not sure that fully explored this phrase, called on the name of the Lord, but I didn't want to just pass it by. So then we get to this main passage, this main story here of Abram and Lot. So I did not bring out a map, and I actually thought about it, but here I am and I don't have it. So let's see what we have in the back of this Bible. Okay, looks like we have a little map. Maybe I'll just hold it up for a minute. I just need to get it in our minds, the general geography. Oh, looks like this is it, huh? Which one shall I use? I guess I'll use this one. This is a map of much later on, but that's okay. The land doesn't change. Let's see how I can do this. High tech. All right. I can't quite see here. Okay. So Abram came down the first time, and he was on the west side of the Jordan River. You can see the Jordan River connects this little blue blob here and this big blue blob here. That's the Sea of Galilee and the Dead Sea. The Jordan River connects them. So Abram came down the first time and stopped in Bethel, which is somewhere around here, and built an altar. Then he went on down to Egypt to get away from the famine, and now he's back in Bethel. Okay, so here's the Mediterranean Sea, here's Abram and Lot, his nephew, and here is the Jordan River. You might not be able to see it, but it's connecting the two blue blobs, all right? The Jordan River, and it's flat down there. I guess it even shows that it's kind of flat on this map. Up here, where Abram is, it's mountainous, and you can see down in this valley where the Jordan River flows, and it's flat on both sides of the Jordan River. Okay, it's often flat on both sides of rivers because rivers flood, and when they flood, they do two things. They wear down the high spots and they fill in the low spots. All right? So since the very beginning, rivers have been a great place if you want to be able to count on flat land and pretty good soil, okay? Because it's not just bare rock. The river is, every time it floods, it lays down this layer of soil and you can grow things there. So we already looked at how some of the first civilizations started around the Tigris and Euphrates River, right? And so again, we see that already there are cities, the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah are down in this valley that is flat near the Jordan River. There's also a lot of grass down there. okay, and it's unbroken. There's a lot of grazing. So that's where they are. They can see down into the valley, but they're kind of up in the hills. All right? And so, Abram and Lot, they don't quarrel, it says, but I think Abram tries to head off a quarrel that he can see coming. He realizes that he and Lot are both doing very well. They have a lot of animals, and that was the measure of wealth in those days, at least for Abram and his family. And so it says the land was not able to bear them. And so what that means is there wasn't enough grazing land to go around. Okay. So if you had your cows out on some land for a while, and then finally all the grass would get eaten down real low, and then you'd move the cows somewhere else, right? That's why Abram lived in, and Lot lived in tents, so they could follow her around. Well, then the next person, if they came right after you, it would be no good. The grass would not have time to recover, okay? So there started to be quarrels, right? Of, hey, how come you guys are hogging all the good pasture land? What are you talking about? You guys got that good well over there, and you got that flat spot up on top. And so the shepherds and the herdsmen of Lot and Abram began to quarrel. And I think Abram wisely realized that it wouldn't be long before that would bubble up, and there would be tension between he and his nephew. Okay, so Abram does something very interesting. And it's a mirror of an incident that happens much later in his life, and it's really I really like it. Okay, but I won't give that one away. We'll wait till we get to that chapter. But what Abram does is he takes Lot, and they go to a place where they can look. They can kind of scout out the country. And the Bible also says the Canaanites and the Perizzites were also in the land. Why does it say that? Well, because Abram and Lot, of course the land could have held Abram and Lot, but you couldn't just go anywhere, right? There were already people around, and they were raising their animals too. Okay, so there were certain places that were unclaimed or that were sort of open range that anyone could use if the grass was good, but there were other places that were already taken. Okay, so that's why Abram and Lot needed to get this settled. So you almost expect when they go up to settle this that Abram would say, you know, right? We read this story and we think, how generous of Abram. But I think we would have still thought Abram to be generous if he had just said, okay, tell you what, you pick the first 2 acres, okay? So you pick a little spot and you claim that, and then I'll go, and then you can go, and then I'll go, and you can go, right? And that way we'll both get some good spots and both get some not so good spots, right? But you can go first, right? We might have said, oh, that was generous. But no, Abram doesn't say that. He says, you take everything you want, wherever you want to go, okay? You claim it, and I'll take the leftovers, okay? In fact, I will go the other way. I'll put some distance between you and I. So you get first dibs. You get all the dibs, okay? And you claim your area, and I will stay out of it, okay? Wow, what a deal, right? And then Lot says, no, Uncle Abram, come on now. You know me better than that. Here, why don't you take some too? And no, he doesn't say that. Lot says, okay. And Lot says, okay, well then I'll claim the plain, okay? The land on each side of the Jordan River down in the valley that's flat, predictable, floods predictably, there's green grass, great grazing, okay? So I'll go down there, and you can have whatever's left, all right? So Lot does that. He goes down to dwell in the plain. It says he even pitches his tent towards Sodom. That means he's not shy about approaching this city of people that are already living there. Abram, on the other hand, it doesn't say he just stays put. It says he actually goes to Hebron. And if you look on the map, Hebron is all the way down. It's south of where Jerusalem will actually end up being. It's miles and miles away. In fact, you can't even see the Jordan Valley anymore. You're adjacent to the Dead Sea by the time you get to Hebron. So he actually goes quite a distance down into the hills of Judah, what will become Judah later, just to make sure that there's no overlap, no potential for conflict with Lot, right? And of course, well, first of all, so why does Abram do this, right? Why does he do this? Clearly, Abram is either not worried about how his animals are going to fare, or he knows that even if his animals all die, God has great plans for him, important plans that we talked about. I don't know which it is, okay? Maybe a combination, maybe it's something else. But to give Lot that prime grassland, I mean, that was the first step towards wealth back then. Grass, okay? Predictable, grazable grass. If you had that, then you could have those animals, and then you had your wealth, you had your security, right? And that's how Abram was wealthy. It says he had a lot of cattle. It says he also had silver and gold, but you can't eat silver and gold. You can trade it. So maybe Abram had just become so wealthy that he was free of concern, right? He thought, big deal. What if my wealth starts to go downhill? I'm already rich enough. I don't know, but it is interesting that I mean, he just gives Lot the prime area that you would normally want to do for your livelihood if you had that kind of lifestyle. And it got me to thinking, right? You might say, or I might say, well, since Abram was rich, no big deal, right? No big sacrifice. Are you rich? Most people that are watching this would say, no, I'm not rich. A few people might say, yes, I'm rich. Okay, but most people don't think they're rich. Did you know that you are fabulously wealthy, ridiculously rich? And I'm not talking in some metaphorical sense or some symbolic sense, okay? If you're a Christian, of course, you have all the riches of heaven. But no, right here on earth. If you can hear this, you must be looking at it through a computer, right? Did Abram have computers? Well, no, you say, but he had all the finer things of life back then. Really, he had a fine tent, right? Would you rather stay in a fine tent or your house? You have air conditioning. Abram didn't have air conditioning, okay? You have access to incredible health care. You have access to strawberries in December, right? Every food grown over the face of the earth you can go get for practically nothing, okay? You have access to education. You can travel through your screens here to any part of the world and find out all about all kinds of interesting subjects, right? You can change your you could change your job if you had a job pretty quickly, right? By just learning about some other job, right? You have so many options. You can travel, right? You could afford, I'm sure, if you can afford a computer, you could bite the bullet and save up, and you could literally fly. You could buy a ticket to any place on Earth. Maybe not North Korea, right? But practically any place on Earth. You can travel incredibly easily. I mean, just on and on and on and on the list. There is no way you would ever trade places with the richest kings of Abram's day, right? The only thing they had on you was that they got to boss a lot of people around. So maybe a few of you that would do it, and you would want that. But other than that, the quality of life, you've got them beat every time. No libraries for Abram. There was wild animals, there was disease, there was the weather. I mean, you're just fabulously rich, right? Like it or not, you are, because you're born in America in the 21st century or the 20th. So you are rich, actually. But how easy would it be for you to do what Abram did? And now, if you are a youth and you haven't yet experienced the joys of a mortgage or an electric bill or something like that coming due, or diapers, then this may not mean as much to you. But it got me to thinking. Right, I've got a job that's a pretty cush job. Right, not a lot of heavy lifting. I'm talking about my teaching job. I'm indoors. I get summers off, air conditioning. Right, people call me Mister. That's pretty sweet. And I make a comfortable living with it. If there was only one job, right? If my job came open and my boss said, you know what, we're going to open your job back up. You can apply for it again, but we're going to take applicants for your job again there, Mr. Golden. And I had a cousin or a brother or a nephew, right, that applied for that job. Would I say, no, you go ahead, you take it. I'll look for another job. Would I? Would I be okay with that? Would I be okay, as rich as I am, with someone messing with my livelihood, right? Or, even more sticky, what if some students at my science class start asking me pointed questions about, where they come from and, evolution and all that stuff? And I just lay it all out there. I say, oh, that's a bunch of ridiculousness. That's a lie. There's no such thing. And then somebody somewhere gets mad about that, and they say, Golden, if you don't toe the line, you're going to lose your job. How about then? Just by my own actions, would I be willing to give up what I think is the basis of my livelihood? I don't know. Right? I think I know the answer. I hope I know the answer, but it hadn't happened yet. So it's interesting to think about what Abram's motivations were here. I think they were really good because of that other passage that I referred to that comes later on in his life, but I'm not going to give that away yet. I think Abram had begun to trust God's provision for him, right? Especially after the episode where he really botched it, or I think he botched it down in Egypt, and God turned it right around and gave him a tremendous blessing out of it. So anyway, he does go down to Hebron, and they separate. You'll notice Lot put up with, or was not put off by, the wickedness of the men of Sodom. It says the men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked before the Lord. Right, we'll get more information about that, but they weren't shy about it. And Lot wasn't shy about going down there and living amongst them or close to them. We find out later he actually moves right on into the city eventually. Why? Well, because it was a good living down there on the plains. Okay? And it doesn't say Lot, forsook the faith. But Lot clearly had the grass in mind when he made his choice. Okay? So, things to think about. And of course, at the end here, in verse 14, God says, hold on, Abram, before you go down to Hebron, let me tell you, now that Lot has left, is going down into the plain to claim his part, that's actually your part, okay? And everything else. You're getting the leftovers, you're getting the prime parts, you're getting the whole area, all right? You're getting the promised land. In fact, this is the first time that I can tell where the promised land gets promised, right? When Abram received a promise from God back at the beginning of chapter 12, it does say, go to a land I'll show you. I'll make you a great nation. In you all families of the earth shall be blessed. But here he specifically says, I'm giving you and your descendants forever this land. Okay, it becomes the promised land. That's where it gets the name, right here. So, Abram didn't rush down and grab Lot and say, hold on a second. God just said that this is all mine, actually. So, no, he didn't. He went ahead and stuck with the plan, and he went down to Hebron and removed from Lot, okay, and waited for God to continue to work. And boy, does God have an interesting plot twist coming up here, right? But we'll get to that next time. So it also says, if a man can number I'll make your seed as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can number the dust of the earth, then shall thy seed also be numbered. So Abram heads down to Hebron, and he's got now a further telling of the promise that God has in mind for him. Right? We talked about that, I think, last time. Is that God kind of unveils his plans to Abram in stages. Right? First, he says, "Get out of Ur. I'll show you the land you're supposed to go to." And then later on, when Abram gets there, he says, "I'm going to make of you a great nation." And now he's come back and he says, "This is the land I'm going to give you. Your descendants are going to be as the dust of the ground." So I think Abram is beginning to trust God more and more and more. All right, and see God's provision in his life and how this is actually working. Right. So, Mr. Golden, are you saying that if I trust God, then I'll be fabulously wealthy? No, I'm not. God hasn't promised Abram fabulous wealth yet either. I don't think. What has he promised him? He's promised him that through him all the nations of the earth will be blessed. You see, God isn't coming down and saying, "Oh, Abram, it's all about you. You're my favorite, Abram." God is saying, "I have plans for the people I love. I have plans to deal with sin. And I think I'll use you, Abram." Okay? That's the promise Abram's getting. And he gets some more details. God is gracious to Abram and reveals to him the details. But the end result isn't Abram's happiness, okay? The end goal. The end goal is God's redemption of the world. Okay? So what am I saying to you? I'm saying that if you trust God and listen to him, you're on the winning team. Okay? And God may ask you to do something that is a great sacrifice, and your time on this earth will be short and miserable. Okay? But then what? Right? Then you'll go to where Abram is right now, and you'll get to hear God say, "Well done, good and faithful servant," and you'll get to watch with Abram as God continues to rescue those upon whom he has set his love. All right? So we'll find out more about how he continues to bless Abram next time. All right? Bye-bye, and God